Also, something I'm going to try to do really hard is actually look you in the eye when we talk, because I realized when we were at Potbelly, I'm so used to you being like taller than me that I kind of just look like at your nose. And then I was like, if I start looking at you in the eye now, it's going to be weird because it'll feel like
this is too much.
Should I go back to your nose? Can you feel the difference?
I'm going to talk weird in a microphone too. I'm going to be like, yes. I did some voice acting for someone's video art recently, where I played a like British muskrat, and
that's a tall order for a voice actor. You got to do a British accent and an animal.
Yeah, but we were like laying in my bed doing it, and it was really funny because it was like the quietest room in my apartment.
Gotcha. And isn't it hard to talk when you're laying down?
Yeah, I was kind of sitting. Up
Okay.
a little bit, but he was lying down.
Because I heard John Lennon sang some vocals lying down to get a specific kind of tone. I think maybe "I'm Only Sleeping" was sung lying down.
Actually?
I think I heard that.
That's cool. I mean, that's conceptually sound.
Well, hello and welcome to the Artcast. Still going with that name a year later. Haven't made an Artcast since, I think, September 2023, but we're back. We're back with a very special guest in from sunny California, Orion Martin. Martin. What do you prefer, a hard T or a Midwestern Martin?
Is that a Midwestern thing?
I don't know. It just feels a little like lazy American accent, but
I say my name like Orion Martin, so I think that according to how I say it, I think it's a soft T.
Do you really? You just kind of mumbled it all
I just
out?
mumble it all together, and I think it sounds like my name is like Orion.
Orion Martin.
Orion. That's how I say my name. Someone's like, "What's your name?" I'm like, Orion.
Can you like say it? Can you like, hi?
My name's Orion Martin.
Shake my hand. Let's.
My name's Orion Martin.
I see what you mean. It's
Yeah.
a little bit kind of all clumped
I
together.
smush it all. Which then people are like, huh? And then I'm like, Orion, and then they're like, fuck, like it doesn't make more sense when I say it because no one hears that name ever. So it's not.
There is some kind of football player with your name.
If you Google Orion Martin, you get a football player for sure.
But I think you're now at the top.
Yeah, I'm coming back.
That's pretty awesome.
I
Because
like
I remember
that you've been Googling me as much as I've been Googling.
Well, we've been friends for like 12 years or so at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like when I would
me.
try to look up your art or something,
Right.
it would come up like a football guy. I was like, what's this?
And
But
now
today
I'm
I Googled you to look at some of your art for this, to prepare questions, and you were top of the list.
Yeah.
So you're moving up in
no
the
thanks
world.
to me, but yeah.
Is that player like injured and dead or something?
Yeah, that could be. I mean, that would make more sense than me being. I mean, how often does a football player get searched? I imagine that when they're like doing good and like new and in their prime, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But then that must fade pretty quick as soon as they're not doing like really good.
You mean you haven't followed the football player Orion Martin's career?
Was it even? I don't even know if it was NFL. It might have been college.
Yeah, not sure.
Yeah,
I didn't look too closely.
I didn't either. But I mean, all that really counts is that I'm winning now.
Yes, congratulations on your Google search result optimization.
Thank you.
I think there's a couple other Dylan Robbies in the world who, one of them has like an article about a bowling competition written about him that like I was a little jealous of when I was 20.
Right.
Googling myself. But I don't like Googling myself. I never do it. And I
Do you
find
have?
it,
Are you like professor? No.
I think some schools I've taught at do come up when you search my name.
Well,
but
you know the worst thing about this thing is that if you Google my name, this is going to come up.
You mean the best thing?
Right.
No, it probably won't. Honestly, I don't have.
I guess that's my
internet
biggest fear is
presence.
that like if you Google because as someone who likes to Google people's names when I meet them, you know, like as that kind of creep, if you're lucky, you find like some really embarrassing interview of them doing a thing on YouTube, you know.
Well, now you'll have one of those, and I hope it won't be that embarrassing, but it very well could be. We're off to a great start.
Lay on the most embarrassing questions you got.
So actually, I did want to talk about this because I kind of want to build up how there's this mythology of Orion in my life that I knew of you before I met you.
Really?
And I don't think I ever talked about this with you before.
Uh-oh.
It's very like minimal stuff, but I just remember like because you were a transfer student, you came in from SFAI, and I don't, my memory is hazy because this is like 2010 or 2008 or 9, but I just heard like, oh, there's this really tall SFAI grad or like transfer in the painting department now. He's like a really good artist, and he's really
Who was
cool.
saying this? Like this was just the like talk of school.
Yeah. I feel like everyone seemed to know you immediately. And
Well, everyone knew me
there.
because I worked at Blick.
Okay, that
So
might
everyone,
be part of it.
everyone knew that I was tall because I worked at Blick. I also had the really long hair at the time,
That's right.
and I worked at Blick for 6 months before I went to school. So I had and I was like a total. I moved to the city without knowing anyone, so I was really determined to meet people via my job.
Mm-hmm.
So I would basically just like corner people and try to hang out with them, and it worked pretty good.
That must have been the secret. Your Blick employment. You made a lot of school friends.
Most people knew me when I went to school because they were like, "You're the guy from Blick," and I was like, "Indeed."
I do remember seeing you work at Blick one particular time, but I don't think I knew you at the time, so I didn't talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, I was like really annoyingly chatty and had nothing to lose, and was really like, it was like I literally moved to Chicago to work at Blick. That was my plan.
Just to be near where all your heroes.
No, because
the
I worked at Blick in San Francisco.
Oh.
And I quit school in San Francisco because I like didn't have any money, and I stopped going to school because I was too broke to like. The idea of taking out money to go to school was like my parents didn't think that was a good idea, or my mom didn't think that was a good idea. So I like, you know, I used the money that my dad had left me or whatever, and then my mom gave me some money, but like they thought that I shouldn't get into debt, so I like was trying to pay my way through school, which obviously didn't work in San Francisco. So I worked at Blick, and I stopped going to school and lived in a basement with all my high school friends. And that was depressing because I was just like doing whippets and hanging out in a basement with my high school friends when my whole idea was to get as far away from Sonoma as possible. So I was like bummed that I wasn't even going to school, hanging out with all my high school friends, like in this like crappy apartment, and was not making art and doing the thing that I thought I should be doing. So I moved to Chicago because it was the only other city I'd ever been to, and I liked it a lot when I went to pre-college. I like loved it. I should have gone here straight away, but I didn't.
Oh yeah, I forgot you did the ECP thing.
Yeah, and I like loved it. It was the best 3 weeks of my life or whatever. I would probably like still say that it was the best 3 weeks of my life.
Wow.
So I was working at Blick. I met Robert Lostutter, and he had asked me like what I asked him what kind of art he made, and he's like figurative art, and he was like, what do you make? And I was like, figurative art, like have you ever heard of Jim Nutt? And he was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of like one of those guys, kind of a little bit. And I was like, oh my god, I love you. And then he was like, why don't you go to school? They're all teaching there. And I was like, that had never like occurred to me or something.
Oh, no way. I figured that was part of your eventual plan.
My plan was to stalk Jim Nutt via the Blick system and like get his address and then like show up at his house and befriend him or something.
Oh
like
my
that.
god.
But But yeah, Robert Lostutter was just like, just go to school. Like they're all teaching there. Like it would be insane if you didn't go to school. And I was like, totally, yes, sir, of course. So then I went to like, there was like a portfolio day coming up, right? And I got like crazy drunk the night before. So drunk that I woke up at like 8 a.m. to go to the thing, which was like early for me at the time. And I was like still drunk from the night before. And Emily was going to like escort me because she really wanted me to go. And she was like trying to be supportive. So me and Emily went to portfolio day. And I was drunk still. And we were like standing in lines in the Columbus building. And I went to Cooper Union. And then I went to SAIC. And Cooper Union told me that I was like too developed or whatever. I was too far along in my development.
That's an interesting feedback.
They couldn't like mold me enough or whatever.
Wow.
And then I went to SIC and it was Jason Dunda and this assistant of his teacher's assistant of him. And I walked straight up and Jason was like, "Hey, Orion." And I was like, I just said my name weird, right?
It sounded normal to me, but I mean, that's such a touching story. He immediately remembered your name.
Immediately remembered me. And I was like, oh my God, crazy. Because I just like, he was like really cool to me. And I loved the class that I took when I was 16. And yeah, I walked straight up and he just was like, "What's up, man?" And I was like, "Hey, can I, like, here's my portfolio." And he's like, "You know that like you don't have to apply. If you go to the pre-college thing, like you're already accepted."
What?
Like, or like something like that. Like you don't, like your portfolio.
You're already like in their system. They
or something like that. And he was just kind of like, "But it's really good to see you. Like, how you been?" And was like really super nice to me.
Damn.
And I was just like, and the teacher assistant guy totally remembered me too. And Jason was like, "Oh, like when you did this thing, like put this red in your painting." Like he was really cool. And
it's such a cute story.
Yeah, it was really cute. And then I felt very like it was just kind of immediately like, "You're in." And then I kind of was like, "Great." And then I took that class with Jim Nutt and it was cool. Well, you know what? I actually have told that story about Robert Lostutter at Blick like a million times. That is like a very cute story that has happened in my life. I go to Chicago to meet my hero or whatever, Jim Nutt, and then I end up like meeting this other guy who I end up is like becomes my other hero, and then gives me the like the answer of how I'm gonna go meet Jim Nutt, and then it was all very cute,
So you weren't as familiar with Robert Lostutter before?
I wasn't then, but it turns out,
he's awesome.
He's awesome, and I love his art, and I've probably ripped him off more than anyone else. Realistically, like I look at his paintings or Richard Linder's maybe more who I rip off actually, but
who is not an imagist?
No, but
Linder is like, isn't he European?
He's European, but he moved to America. Because he makes all these like funky pimp paintings when he lived in New York. He moved to New York. He's like I think he's like Slavic of some sort, I think. But he moved to New York.
Got it.
But then like Robert Lostutter's whole thing is that he like picked up where Linder left off. Like that was his early career. Was these like very Linder-esque things,
Because they have the same initials. He was like, I have to pick up where this R.L. Stein.
I don't think I ever put that together. But yeah, but they're very related. But
I guess I don't know Linder's work enough, but Lostutter's work is so like hyper focused on like this small format, like the face, like is central to his.
If you look at like Robert Lostutter's earlier work, like I
need to do that.
That was kind of what I first saw of his. It was less of the portraits, like the flower faces or the like bird faces. It was like this very. It was like all these like central female forms with like, and they're all small watercolors too. But they were, and then he did his like big oil painted versions of it, which he only made a few of, or like a very few of, and but they were like very garment focused kind of paintings, and it was all this kind of like central figure with this kind of like folding off geometric form stuff, which is very Linder-esque.
Okay.
And you can, I mean, if you hold them up to each other, like the early Lostutter stuff and the, I don't know, late Linder stuff, maybe you can kind of see the connection.
I was gonna say, you said Lostutter's now switched to that like more portrait focus, like the flower and the feather thing. Is that just a trend that a lot of figurative artists have? Is as they get older, they focus in more and more on like a simple portrait, because that's all Jim Nutt does now.
Yeah.
And his early work is so grandiose and like complex.
Well, that's just like that's like when we were talking about when I was saying that like
artists peak at 50. Right?
Georgia O'Keeffe getting lazy in her old age, and Christina Ramberg.
But she still worked really big, O'Keeffe.
Yeah, but like everyone's always like seeking the simplification thing, because it's like you try to make it easier for yourself because it is hard, which
True.
I get, but I mean, Jim Nutt makes like one painting a year now, right?
I don't know how many he does. He's pretty prolific, because when he had that MCA show, there were dozens of portraits.
Those were from the last like couple decades.
They were, but like more than one a year, I would say.
Yeah, but I think now he's like, it's really slowed down.
Okay.
From what I understand, but because that last show he had, it was all drawings. It was like 8 graphite drawings of like, you could probably count the lines in that show,
Was that in New York?
Yeah.
Peter Saul hasn't really gone that way. He still paints really big, complicated stuff.
That's true. But he's like a psycho. He's like always been like, he's like someone who says like, yeah, you just like pick your thing and you just paint it as good as possible, which I feel like is still his kind of like. But
is that his quote?
It was something like that.
I'm trying to attach that to my perception of his work, and I don't get that.
It's painted really well.
It is. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But his thing is like a zillion different things. Like, what is his thing? I guess he does have a recognizable style.
He's a very solid thing.
Okay.
Probably more than most artists. He's like the most recognizable artist.
His early work is really like kind of upsetting to me. It's so sloppy.
Yeah, but it's like different time, You're like competing against abstract art and stuff then.
That's true.
So you're just like, it's all relative. But he's like he's an interesting guy, because he's always been like, I'm like, oh, just like a dumb guy painting a dumb painting. But he's like also went to like all of these Ivy League schools and is a very, high educated person who's like always trying to convince everyone that he's just like a regular dummy.
I didn't get that perception of him. His work has like kind of like populist, like
yeah. But if you like read his interviews,
cartoon.
He's always kind of like, oh, gee whiz, I don't know.
I actually have an interesting book of his correspondence from when he was like letters he would send his parents and stuff. They made a book out of that, and it's from like 50s and 60s. It's really fascinating, because you get to hear his thoughts on all his new paintings when he was struggling to like get galleries interested in his work and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's super good. I recommend it, because it puts into perspective all those really sloppy, like a messy kitchen with a bunch of trash and like bright colors, but he like really cared about those paintings. He was trying his best. Yeah. But I just don't think they're very good.
He's kind of an interesting, like, he also just had like one guy who ended up buying his work every year. So he had like kind of he didn't really like hustle in the same way that everyone else did. He like lived in his like house in San Francisco and had like one collector who would come over a couple times a year and like buy work and kind of like paid for his life.
That's like the old like patronage model of like the Renaissance. That's, I think, should be a more common thing today.
I think in Chicago there was a bit of that. Like I think some of the images had some kind of people like that were pretty like consistent. I think, I don't know.
So that's like a really wealthy person really believes in this artist's work. So they're like, I'm gonna pay for their life.
I think that's how the collecting of. I think that's like the imagists are mostly bought in Chicago by kind of like wealthy Chicagoans. who like, because you can't, because the price of Imagist art is like less than some like 24-year-old who, you know, has like orange hair and went to Cooper Union and like, you know, sucks dick and does drugs on the weekend. You know, it's like that art costs more than some beautiful, insane Robert Lostutter portrait painted in the 85 or some shit like that.
Right. Yeah, there's always going to be some of that, the hot new thing syndrome.
Well, but like, I don't know. That's like my friend Audrey, her rich Chicago parents, they like her house has or Carl Worsam drawings in it and stuff like that, because they just like are rich Chicagoans who collect the like relevant Chicago art because it is cool and affordable.
I wonder how long it took them to reach the point where, like, for wealthy Chicagoans, like, it was like collecting Imagist work is the thing to do. Like, was it right away when in the 60s, like when they're showing at the Hyde Park Art Center and stuff?
I mean, if they were lucky. I mean, if they were smart, or if they like were into cool stuff.
Right.
But that was something that like John Corbett told me when I did that show there, and like I didn't sell anything. It was like this. He was like consoling you. Well, they felt really guilty for like not selling more of it, and I was kind of just like so stoked to do that show that it like whatever. I was just like, I got to be in your gallery. That's all that really matters to me. But they felt, I think it's been kind of awkward because I think they felt awkward about that. But it was awkward for them because my paintings cost so much money compared to like all their other art, and I was like a fucking, you know, weird young kid showing paintings in New York, bringing these like extremely heavy glossy frames to their like thing.
That was when they still had that like walk up space on Ashland, I think.
Yeah. And it was like, yeah, it was just, I mean, this is an awkward situation because my paintings cost as much as like their famous historical art. And I would like, and then they didn't sell any of it because, and then he was like, yeah, there's like a price cap here and it's really low. It's not the same as New York or anywhere or Europe or whatever. It's like we deal in a different kind of thing.
Interesting. That was like a 2-person show with some sculptural work, right?
Yeah, it was like
who was
40 artists on like a big table.
It was 40 artists?
Or something like that. It was like some huge amount of artists that like all made like table-sized little trinkets kind of thing. And then like 3 big paintings of mine, and then 1 small like portrait, which was weird because I had this like I was making these, which has happened to me kind of often, is I try to make like a big body of work because I'm all like I want to make like serial art or whatever, you know, and then it takes me so long to make a painting that I have to like show them in pieces, and I never get to show the like, because that was supposed to be a series of 5 paintings, and then I end up showing them in 3 different shows because I couldn't get them to go in a row, which is all I wanted. And so I showed 3 of them there.
And they were like all similar format, like these like gate, like pole. Like,
yeah, they were like all the same height, but the canvases like got wider, and then the gate like expanded, and then the like frames that I had carved like a sound wave got more like ripply as it got smaller, as the width got smaller. So it was like it had this kind of like wall kind of look.
Whoa.
Or that was the idea, was if you were to see them all in a row, you would kind of get that.
Yeah.
But then it took me over a year to finish those 5 paintings and make the frames that I basically split them all up, and they never got kind of showed in sequence, which is a shame. But it's kind of how it worked with the last show I made too. I wanted to make like 10 of these big paintings with all the people, and I wanted to like look like a magazine, like just, you know, be like chaotically dense. And then I finished 6, and then I finished like 2 others for a fair afterwards, which is kind of how all of my like big grandiose plans is get kind of like shuffled into fairs.
I'm sad about the fact that I haven't seen a lot of your recent paintings in person, because that Corbett show was, I think, the last time I saw your more recent work in person, and I remember being blown away by like the evenness of the surface in a way that doesn't, like a lot of paintings can look like that in a photo because it's all flattened out, but to see that in real life and like know it's painted, but it was so seamless was pretty mind blowing. So I really want to see like your more recent stuff in person.
Well, they got less. They got less refined, I guess.
Really?
Because that was really I was really the kind of thing was that like I would paint basically until the pencil was gone, and all of the kind of revisions and all of the drawing happened kind of as always happened on the canvas, and that was a more minimal where I was kind of okay with having just like a flat color as a background. Eventually I became like, that's not good enough. That's not like an acceptable background. So it had to be like a photograph or some text, you know, like a flat color background wasn't, but that was still in my flat color background phase.
But there was that one with a face that was like a city background. Yeah. That was pretty elaborate background.
Yeah. That was kind of like what I ended up doing after that. I kind of like phased out of that, and that was kind of the in between this like the show I had at Bodega, the first show, that was all flat backgrounds, and it was kind of like a dog and a trumpet on a gray background, or like a shoe thing on like a orange background. You know, it was or like a fence thing on a green background.
You know, the imagery that you put on the background is so like densely layered that I didn't even notice that they were just flat colors until you just said that. They seem just as like layered and complex as the ones you're making more recently, but now I see it now. Like
they were more kind of like graphic, probably more like aligned with like a kind of imagist sensibility than what I do now. It was much more kind of, it was more drawing is really what it was. It was much more drafting, and it was a lot of this kind of like simple gradient drafting shape volume thing, you know, that's probably more aligned with like it was less like photo reliant, which is what my paintings now have become, pretty reliant on like some source to kind of guide me into whatever I'm, because I want it to be like detailed enough to look like, if it's not realistic, I want to have like a kind of realism about it so I can compete with the other kind of realistic things, or be really hyper simple, but that's like a different choice. But
you wouldn't be using photos references back in those like the dog trumpet days.
I mean, for the dog, for sure. Yeah, I guess I would. But it was very much in the kind of like simplifying everything into kind of like simple 3-color thing was really like the mode then.
And this is really interesting to hear you say this, because earlier when you told me you don't plan out your recent paintings, like no drawing and stuff, I like my mind went to those like early, that first Bodega show with the dog and the trumpet and some of those others. Like I thought for sure like that requires some planning to know what you're going to do, like what that idea comes from.
Those were more, I'm trying to think of like what paintings were. Well, there was one painting that was like the like cherry face glass kind of looking thing, and that one was really photographic. That was just me painting a close-up of a shot glass.
Oh, that's what that was.
And then just kind of like, instead of like the edges of the painting kind of like wrapping around like a glass would, I just kind of like made up some kind of texture that made it look like it went continuously out. So that was photographic. And the 3 paintings that were in the Whitney, those were supposed to be for that Bodega show, and those were all going to be the same size. But then and those were all kind of toying with some photographic stuff. Like there was like the way the lamp was painted, like the base was kind of like this like blown up like photographic stippling thing, and then the background of the boot one was this kind of like blown up stippled YouTube video still. And so I was kind of like, I was using photographic reference stuff, but most of it was like blown up to be this kind of blurry thing. I guess now it's more kind of like photograph on photograph with graphic stuff kind of like intertwined. It became about like how to like intertwine them more, like where one doesn't start and stop so obviously, where they were kind of like continuation of each other, where like there could be something like growing out of the background that was a graphic element that was coming out of a photographic element that had another photographic element on top that would kind of like sandwich the kind of like modes of style, where before it became very clear cut, like stacked, you know.
This sounds like perfect description of your last Works on Paper series with the steppers. Aren't those like photos that have been painted on?
Yeah, that was me trying to do like an analog version of what I was it was kind of like skipping all the rendering of the photograph and just kind of like, oh, let me just draw the thing onto the photograph. But also with my kind of like funny, like, oh, this is gonna be like my net art idea where I could like collect a bunch of JPEGs and like can just because I really wanted to make like a bunch of work, like because I had just struggled so hard to make 5 paintings in Sweden and they felt so kind of like I don't know what I'm doing, and I was like, okay, I have an idea for the show, and I'm like, I want to make like a series of like 20 paintings at once because I could like I'm gonna come up with like one theme and I'm just gonna like milk it because that's like what making paintings is all about. I'm just gonna fucking like riff on a theme till I can't riff no more, and it's all gonna be one show. I'm just gonna be like.
This was the steppers, the impetus for that series. Is that what you're
yeah? Well, that
about?
started before the actual paintings for the show, and
oh, okay.
So I technically started making those first.
Yeah,
but then I was kind of working. I kind of ended up working on those after I sent the paintings, but they were kind of they started first, and then the way that those worked is a lot of the like graphic themes that overlaid the photos ended up being used in the painting, so they kind of function like drawings for that show because it was very like the way that I think about manipulating photographs or something was present in the steppers stuff, but that was supposed to be like an analog version of like what I do or something like that.
I really like the steppers. I think they're funny and weird. And I think my favorite one is where there's like round like fisheye reflections of you like painting the painting.
Yeah.
It's like this acknowledgement that like this is a creepy subject matter in a way, like close-ups of women's feet stepping on the camera. Did you take those photos or are they found?
No,
photos?
it was like my funny idea about like, oh, I'm gonna make my like net art because it was just like a Facebook of I just typed in like bug point of view or something like that, or like I had seen a bunch of photos like that. I like that point of view, and so I was just trying to find the thing, and I found some like kink Facebook group of like women stepping on the camera, and I just like saved them all. So the idea was that I was gonna like work my way through this entire, you know, I had like 50 pictures, and I was gonna like manipulate all of these images, and it was gonna be like this way to produce a lot of images. And I thought I could do it fast, but nothing is fast for me. So I ended up like only making 5, you know, like to me, I thought I would have a show of like 100 of these, and it would be this like way to like speed up my process and kind of like make it easier and make it a little bit like more fun and free. I could be loose because it's paper and like whatever. I don't have to do all the rendering. But
you did render the shit out of the like little painted details. They're still just as refined.
Exactly. Like the things I ended up doing just ended up being like I would like render the photograph but black and white, you know. So like it wasn't necessarily in some weird thing that you don't really notice that I painted. The one where
there's like a close up of the girl's face who's also like
yeah.
Is one of those like not even a real photo? It looked like a CGI character.
Yeah.
Is that true? Like, because it was Uncanny Valley type shit. Like, couldn't tell if it was real or.
That was the last one I made, and I was like, I thought it was too ugly to include. I was like, this is like heinously ugly, and I'm
glad you did. It's
funny. I
mean,
but that's kind of like that show was me being like, this is gonna be the biggest, ugliest paintings I can possibly dream up. Like I thought that was really cool. And then I got so mad when no one bought them. You know, like I literally the whole time was being like, "This is the ugliest thing I can possibly imagine," like on purpose. Like I thought that was cool, you know. Because usually, earlier I would kind of fight that. Like I would start really Clown Town and kind of make it as like colorful and kind of like obnoxious looking as possible. and then my rationale would kind of kick in, and then I'd kind of like tone it all down and make it a little bit more serious looking, and try to get kind of self-conscious and try to make it really smart looking, you know. And that was kind of like how I would like clean it all up and kind of like find my way. But these, I was really like determined to make my like big obnoxious, you know, like that kind of like Kippenbergery kind of like clashy is cool kind of look, you know. All the wrong colors in just the right way, you know. I thought that was, which is probably very influenced by like, you know, Zoe and like what she liked and the kind of like art that she was into. In the same way that I think the art that I made in college was very influenced by you being next to me. I like tried. I think when Daniel was in my studio, I was making like my like kind of pseudo smart art.
Yeah, like screen printing abstract patterns.
Yeah, and like videos and whatever. And then when you got it, I was like, oh, I should probably make like figurative paintings to like impress Dylan. Because you're like,
but that's what you were doing before you went to advanced painting too. Because I saw you're like,
I was making like really cartoony paintings, though. You know, I think that the reason that I kind of was like, oh, I should kind of like, I think because we talked about like, you know, we talked about like figurative painting, and that like was really, and I could talk because I like that a lot, and so I think my impetus to be kind of like have like a kind of realism was probably to like impress you.
That's hilarious because, I mean,
or to make like a more like legitimate figurative type painting, you know, where there's like people doing a thing, because that's what you did, and then. When Daniel was in my studio, I was like, I would have to make some like edgy fucking thing to impress Daniel.
So earlier when you said were in Jim Nutt and Richard Hall's class with Daniel, you're talking about the other Daniel.
Daniel
Hurwitz.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Daniel Sullivan.
Yeah. I got a little confused because I don't know what Daniel's work looks like, but I thought he was the Daniel in your class that was like the best painter in the class, and you glommed on to him because like, I mean.
Well, that was true of Jim Nutt's class.
Which Daniel was that?
Hurwitz.
Okay. That's what I thought, because he's more of like a traditional painter.
Yeah. Daniel Sullivan is like he's like cutting up motorcycle pants and making his like weird abstracts. He was like, I worked one summer with him and Tom Roach, and they kind of like taught me about New York art world. And like explained to me galleries and like why it matters, like what gallery shows you, and I really like looked up to those guys in a weird way, even though they were like my classmates or whatever. But they seemed really serious, and like they knew how to like navigate the art world. So and Tom Roach was very, I don't know if you remember, but Tom Roach was very influential to. Was he still there when you were there? He might have left.
I don't know if we were in advanced painting at the same time, but I definitely knew him.
He was extremely influential to like me and all of like a bunch of my friends in school, because he was like he had like a weird German sounding voice, and he made the most like stark conceptual art, and we all thought it was like really cool.
Yeah. I remember being at a couple of his crits and being like kind of blown away by the level of discourse happening about these like photos he printed in his closet or something like that. Yeah. They were very conceptual.
Yeah, he was very serious beyond his year. And he ended up working at the Art Institute for a long time as like the head prep or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I always thought that like, because even when he was in school, his art was always like extremely well prepared, like the material and the way that he handled it, and it was always like he was always handling his art like an art handler.
Mm-hmm. So perfect employment opportunity.
Yeah, but I learned later that his dad worked in a museum as a it was a science museum, but he was like a preparator or whatever that's called in the science museum.
Okay.
So Tom going into that was kind of like a family business kind of thing, which is like pretty interesting, and like that he was like into art, so he did like the art version of his dad who was into science.
It's crazy how widespread that following the family tradition footsteps are. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like to think about it that often, but my dad was also a art professor, and that's
Yeah.
what I do now. And I
Yeah.
feel like I probably wouldn't have even considered this as a job if, like, subconsciously at least, like, I knew, like, oh, he did that. It's a possible way to
Yeah.
live.
I mean, that's
Like,
why.
what did your dad do?
That's why I want to make saunas now.
He was a sauna builder.
Well, he did that in Oregon. He helped. He helped with like the plumbing and basically helped with like the kind of like logistics of how this giant sauna and outdoor shower space would work in this like fairgrounds. And
Wow.
and it was like a wood fire heated sauna and stuff like that. But
It's very specialized specialty.
no,
Like,
it wasn't. It was just like hippies figuring out a thing. And,
Oh.
and he was just like, he had like a really intense work ethic and was like but he went to college for like theater and stuff. He told me that he could like swallow swords and stuff, which I don't think I really believe, but he was like a liar and a storyteller.
There's like a trick to that, right? Like, no one's actually swallowing swords, are they?
Yeah. You just open your throat up.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's not that crazy.
I thought they were like trick swords or something that just kind of disappear into the sheath or something.
No,
but
you
people
can
actually
open your throat up and put things down it. People do it with dicks all the time.
They're much less sharp and like
Yeah, but it's just
dangerous.
it's just like a trick. You just have to like learn the way to kind of like open your throat and like let it not, I don't think that, I was watching some guy at the Ren Fair do it a couple days ago. It was very
Oh,
real.
really?
Yeah.
Did you think my dad could do that?
I think I probably told Kira that, yeah. But I also think my dad lied about everything because my dad was kind of like he was like a entrepreneur is the most annoying way to put it, but he was a very like business minded kind of, he like grew up poor and wanted to make money and was like a hippie he was a salesman. That's what he did for a living. And then he didn't want to work for the like he sold drugs. That was his first sales job. And then he moved on to security systems in the 80s and did like a kind of corporate job. And he was really good at it because he's a good talker and a good people person, which I guess is maybe where I get that part of my personality or something. But he's extremely like charming kind of guy. He was a theater kid. He was also a cheerleader, which is kind of interesting.
Like in school or something?
Yeah, his mom wouldn't let him play football, so he was a cheerleader.
I mean, that's pretty ahead of the curve to be if she was worried about concussions or health or something.
Yeah, totally. But, he was like a weird mix of like being hyper masculine and kind of like hyper trippy stoner, soft hippie freak theater kid, So,
Yeah.
And then he was also from Rhode Island, so it's like kind of like Boston tough, Okay. And then also, he was like an odd jobs person. He like painted houses and, but then eventually he owned his own business, and that was kind of always his thing that he wanted to do. And it was a wine tour business, so it was like kind of tour talking showman thing, which I guess. And he was like an insane traveler, super traveler, and like foodie person, which I guess I've kind of gotten a lot of that kind of idea. And super hard worker, crazy, like mega, like you got to work super hard. And my mom's Midwestern from South Dakota, so she's got that kind of same, like you got to work all the time. So I think that idea of like, your day is to what your life's duty is to like wake up and work is kind of like what they were always pounding on.
That must be where you get it, your work ethic.
Which is confusing when you like work for yourself making paintings. It like gets kind of demented. Like like there's no time to like turn that off or something.
It's kind of comforting in a way to hear you talk about your work ethic like this, because just seeing your work from the outside, like they're obviously these labors of like incredible time and effort to make these complex, real, like beautifully rendered paintings. But when I see them, I assume like, oh, you must just like love doing this. Like this is like the best, most fun your brain can have. So you just will spend all day painting these things. But you've been talking today about how like it's work. It's hard work.
But it's also like, I mean, I think that was one of my more recent strategies, was to keep on reminding myself that I did like doing it, because I do like doing it, because I sit and I watch TV and I render shit, and it is mindless and it's brainless, and
What's your go-to like TV show while you're painting?
I just like turn on, like I can watch like Love Island, like some reality TV show that goes on forever.
Yeah.
As the longer the better, or like a podcast that lasts like 75,000 hours is the best thing for me, because it just like is endless. As long as it like can hold my attention and I can pay attention fully to that, then I can render forever.
I definitely listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks when I'm painting, but I can't really get into shows because I'm like, when I'm looking at the show, like I'm not painting. But are you kind of listening to it more as the audio?
I'm more listening to it, but I also I have my computer right to the left of me, and I have the window small, and then I have the thing I'm painting next to it. So every time I look at the thing I'm painting, which is really frequently, I'm looking at the thing. And then, when something exciting is happening, I stop for a second, I watch the TV, and then I go back to painting. And like when, I think it also has to do with like being alone. It's a good way to deal with being alone, is to have TV on, So to me, it's kind of like a way to stay okay with that, because that's the part that drives me really crazy about painting. But it's also just, it's like, it's fun because you get to just like get psycho about some TV show or some podcast or something, and then you forget the fact that you're by yourself for 12 hours rendering a fucking square, like not even square, like 8-inch square of rendered shit.
Because you've been painting for so much of your life, is it pretty much like a straight line if you know what you want it to look like and you have the palette set up, you can just kind of do it without screwing it up? Or is there a lot of trial and error still where like you can't get something right and you have to scrape it away and start again?
I mean, 90% of why my paintings take forever is just that, like scraping and moving things around. But that's more like compositional subject matter, like what the painting is of. That's what takes me forever. The rendering part is the busy work that I enjoy because it's brainless, which is why I like gessoing canvases more than I like painting, because it's just like I like the brainless activities that I know I'm good at. And like right. That's what rendering a photograph is to me. It's like I know I can do that, and it feels good because I know how to do that. Which I think people find that to be like kind of amazing, but to me, like the rendering part of a photograph is like really simple. It's like 1-to-1, You zoom in the photo really close, and you just like paint really close, and you just try to, I project most of the stuff, so it's all pretty like puzzled. It's a puzzle activity where you just kind of turn off your brain and you just kind of put the pieces where they need to go.
Right.
And it takes time, but the time is not anxious time. The anxious time that I find really difficult is the
compositional part.
Yeah, and that's the part that I also get off on the most, and that's the math equation that like when you solve it, and you're like, hell yeah, like that's the rewarding part of painting to me, is like making a really complicated problem and then fighting your way through it, and then getting to the part where you've like resolved it as like a kind of thing. I mean, most of my paintings get really busy because I'm fighting against the composition problem that I've started. And when it's less busy, and I usually like it a little bit more, is when it like kind of goes easier, which is super rare, but happens every once in a while. And I'm like, you nail it the first go.
And like I missed what you said, like you find that more or less satisfying when it's easy.
I find it more, it's nicer, it feels better when it's easier. but it's like a.
But your whole like work ethic is like it has to hurt. It has to be a struggle, right?
I don't want it to be a struggle, but it always is because it's never goes because my idea of a painting is always like, okay, it's gonna be like a. There's a terrible idea I had. It's gonna be a picture of me in drag, and then a picture of me in a business suit, like being like dommed by me in drag, and then I like get the pictures, I take the pictures, and then I like try to set it up, and then I'm like, oh, this is so stupid looking, I don't know how to make this a painting, I don't like the pictures I took were all terrible, and then I just end up like throwing that idea completely out, and then I have like some picture from that I think is like usable for an actual image, because that's what's ultimately more important. Like my ideas are irrelevant to what the painting actually is, like it always, and then I try to like feed back the ideas that I kind of, the like idea quote unquote that I had, but like image and is always like what dictates what's happening, or like wanting to make a painting red, that wins over like a lot of things, like I have like some really concrete thing that I want to do, but it's really open-ended, and that always wins over the kind of like more narratively complex painting stuff, like the painting that was really easy in the last show was like the one of me in drag walking with a costume, and then there's like eggs with like a kind of like spiky shape coming out of it, and like kind of like radiating lines. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's called Mother, right?
Yeah.
When I saw that title and the face, I thought it was like an actual like old photo of your mom or something.
That's a lot of people thought.
But I think I read the press release and it said it was you in drag. So,
yeah.
And there's a few of those in the show, like a few paintings with.
It's two, yeah. But
is that the first time you've done that for this show, or have you, or like use it in paintings, or drag in general?
To me, it was just like me being like, I don't know how to. To me, it's like the problem of making figurative paintings is like, who do you paint? Because ultimately, it like matters who you're painting. And I've always wanted to make like kind of like general paintings, like Jim Nutt style. Like it's just kind of like a woman, a man, And when you make like a cartoony painting, it's much more kind of like it's just a thing. It's a character or whatever. But like because I'm attached to photographs in the way that I have become reliant on photographs, that like it became always a problem like who it was, if it's not like generic enough, and that I'd always have like Eric or something who's seeing like from Bodega, like who would see a painting and be like, ask me like, oh, who is that? I'm like, I don't know, it's fucking I don't know, it's a picture from the internet, doesn't matter, I don't know. And he'd be like, oh, okay, like seemed disappointed in it. So I think I like became like, oh, painting myself is the only safe answer to this problem. But then like painting yourself is boring, and then it's like I want to make paintings of. I decided that I want to make this show like very like Spice Girls, kind of like 90s funky girl style.
Is that where the girl at kickboxing with her foot up is supposed to be?
Well, that's
like...
Mel C, yeah.
Oh, it is.
Or the body is. I think the face. I replaced the face with some other thing, but yeah, okay. That's like a pretty well-known photo of Mel C.
Got it.
And there's like other parts of like Spice Girls ads and other paintings and stuff like that. But that was like
what's the title of that painting from? It's like Dong
Bang. It's
I googled it and nothing came up. So I assume you made it.
It's like a techno style. It's from like some photo I found that's like a picture of a guy at a rave, and he has a shirt that says Donk Bang on it, and then the lights, like the colored lights that are in there's like kind of circle color lights with like beams of light. It's from that photo, and it's just like what the guy's shirt said. I thought it was funny.
Cool.
But apparently it's like a techno style. It's like some subgenre of techno.
Another through current I noticed in that show was like the spotlights on faces. There's a few of those like really hyper specific, like a face where like just the half of it will be illuminated.
Well, that's in that painting.
It's in that one, but it's in the Mother one too. It's like there's a spotlight just on like the chin or something.
Oh yeah, no, that's like there's like a rainbow on her face.
So that's like just overlaid. It's not in the source.
Yeah, that was. Oh no! You know
the one with the financial domination. There's also spotlights there too.
Yeah.
It's like in a few of them, and I was.
No, the thing on the Mother painting that you're thinking of is she's wearing like glasses, like sunglasses that are kind of gradient. Like they go from like kind of like purple to brown. And so I wanted it to be like you were looking at her through the same glasses. So there's like a gradient of, there's like a shadow gradient over her face as if like you're looking through those glasses at her or something.
Wow. I would never have made that leap.
Yeah. Then there's also like this like rainbow that was kind of
I
like,
remember the rainbow.
which is kind of from some other idea I had about like, I don't know. I painted something else and I kind of just like got, because a lot of because I paint so transparently that, and
You
the thing
do?
that you see that I was getting to that in these things is that the paint got a lot thinner and you can see the pencil all over the place. And that when you're looking at it, you're seeing like this like layer of drawing buried in all of these various kind of opacities of paint.
Whoa. So they are different surfaces than like that Corbett show.
Yeah,
They're-
that's I guess what I was. This is the most long-winded way for me to get to the point that like the way that the finish of them is not like they're not as skin like in the way that Jim Nutt talks about like you paint it up as like a skin. They're not as like one uniform surface anymore. They're still super flat and painted the same way. But you end up catching a lot of the underdrawings because I draw to the very end now. So like there's like I basically that's not true. There's never like a raw pencil, but there like you can see pencil. But I'm changing it until like the final layer of paint, which is more than just 3 now. It's usually like a lot more than that. So it's
Wow.
but it used to be like 3 layers of paint to cover up the pencil, and now it's kind of like varying levels.
You told me earlier you're kind of getting back into that idea at least of the custom hand carved frame or just kind of more elaborate
I mean,
constructions.
I did some really cool stuff. Like I got this like guy who did like inlay for acoustic guitars to like do inlaid frames, and like I had cool, and like I think the carved frames I did were really cool, and like I just saw one recently. They look really good. I mean, I'm proud of that stuff because it was kind of a big production to make, you know, and kind of impressed with the fact that I did it at all. And they were all car painted and it was sexy, and it like kind of tied back to the kind of like furniture stuff I like, and the kind of like painting kind of existing in this like designed object, kind of like not so straightforward painting. You know, it had this kind of like tie to you know, whatever design and furniture.
Memphis.
Yeah, exactly.
I found out what that is from one of your press releases. It was either High Art or Derosia. They mentioned Memphis design, and I had to Google
I was
it.
pretty into that when you were around in college. But I think by the time you were there, that was like when Daniel was around. I think by the time you were there, I was like,
You probably talked about it, but I kind of didn't know.
I probably
much
pretended
about
like
design.
I didn't care about anything other than like fucking like Neo Rauch
Lucian
or whatever.
Freud or something.
Yeah, I was probably back into my just like purely like Mary Cassatt, whatever Syrah conversations.
I don't think I like even talked about that stuff. But I love hearing that was your perception and your memory of it is like, oh
Although,
yeah. Mary
we also
Cassatt.
talked about like Portishead and Bjork too.
Yeah, I remember the music soundtrack of the studio was always an important topic of discussion.
And an important topic for what's her name? What was your teacher called? She wasn't even my teacher.
There were a couple situations involving music that I'm thinking
No,
of.
the Indigo generation.
Oh, Molly Zuckerman.
Molly, yeah.
I was, yeah.
Who just like came in and was basically like, you like, and your stupid like twee ass Bjork listening.
Yeah, I remember something you mocked me for mercilessly after she said it was like, you should drink more caffeine or something.
Yeah, you'd be
She
a
was
lot
like,
more
"You're
interesting.
boring."
Yeah, you'd be a lot more interesting if you drank some fucking coffee. Which I mean, I like had this really embarrassing time. I like some big opening thing where I was like wasted and I saw her and I like she was sitting at a table and I literally got on like my knees and like basically like just like gushed about how cool I thought she was. So embarrassing.
I mean, I'm sure she loved that. She
Yeah,
probably remembers it fondly to this day.
Yeah, but it was funny because I think I remember bringing up the like Indigo Generation thing and how funny that was to me. But like, you know, you and me were like a pretty like picture perfect like art school confidential guy. Like we were that kid for sure.
Yeah, when I had hair, people would compare me to that actor a lot.
Yeah, and we were both like kind of like sad and whatever, just like earnest in our painting ways.
Yeah.
And like into our like really cliche art school music, you know.
I remember I tried to put on some post-hardcore sounding shit one time, or like emo rock, and you were not having it. You were like, I can't listen to
Ironic,
this.
because that's like what I listen to now.
I think it was at the drive-in, or either them or Mars Volta, like something with Cedric screaming, and you couldn't handle it, and you made us go back to like television or something safe, because we both liked a lot of that like 70s 80s post-punk stuff.
I mean I've always liked Mars Volta. I don't think I ever really like. I think At the Drive-In was a little, you know, sophisticated for me or something. But
I'd say the opposite compared to Mars Volta. That was like the precursor.
Yeah. But I guess At the Drive-In never really worked for me. But I always liked Mars Volta a lot.
Okay, I mean I can see that. It must have been at the drive-in then.
Yeah, probably.
Because Mars Volta would have been okay. Yeah, we might have even listened.
That's more like dissonant, like whatever, like groovin kind of.
A lot of Afro-Cuban kind of percussion parts.
I was also probably in like some annoying phase of my whimsical music idea. You know.
There's that word again, whimsy. Like, how do you relate to the notion of whimsy in your daily life or in your art? Because I think it means different things to different people.
Well, I grew up going to Renaissance fairs and hippie festivals, so like whimsy always was a very positive looking thing to me. And I've always liked like Primus and Jethro Tull and kind of like medieval-y, showy rock groups that are very kind of like, I mean, Primus is not a medieval-y, but like Gentle Giant, or like these kind of like 70s showman kind of thing. So I don't, Whimsical is always, I mean, it's like Whimsical to me is like straight up like elves and wizards and shit, or like, you know, or like vaudeville. I always like vaudeville is a cool association to me. I think I also think because people think it's like corny, I think I like it more, you know. But yeah, that's Whimsical is like pretty Ren Fairy to me, you know.
I always have a positive association with Whimsical too.
Clearly, look at your art.
Yeah, you called it Harry Potter earlier. I think that's
your art
that's
is
fair.
Your art is like like a guy in like a vest walking through like an enchanted hallway with like books that are talking. It's like, God. If that's not whimsical, I don't know what is. You know?
Damn, you just cut me deep.
I mean, I don't think that's.
Yeah, like you. That's the compliment for you.
Yeah, to me that's awesome. But I think it's just different people. You know.
You know that one famous like pointillist painting from the late like 1880s. It's not a Seurat, but it's like Lionel Feniger, maybe. Like I actually forget his name.
In the Circus?
No, it's like a profile, a guy who was, I think, a critic of theirs, like a writer, and there's a spiral psychedelic pinwheel background, and he's just kind of like pointing.
Yeah. I love that painting. I love that painting.
I figured you would.
And
each
part yours. Each part of the thing is like a different pattern, right? Yeah,
it might be.
It is. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I love that painting.
It's really good painting, and I think it's quite whimsical.
Extremely whimsical.
Yeah.
but like I think that was a tough thing for me because it's like when you're friends with like Tom Roach and Ingrid.
Oh yeah, they don't like Whimsy.
And Ingrid, and like you want to be really smart seeming because their whole thing is like I'm gray, like smart, and like intellectual art, and like conceptual art, and like concrete, and like Berlin and Germany and brutal and like stark, which I also was like trying to, that was cool to me.
Yeah, there's cool things about all that too.
Yeah, but that was like at this kind of extreme odds with my like, I'm a circus boy and everything is like a jester hat and like covered in velvet, which was like my childhood and like what art was to me when I was a kid. And like through high school, it was always like Primus and all of this like kind of wacky, like I think in Northern California, like carnival rock is what I would call it. Like Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum and like Secret Chiefs 3, which was all this like really kind of like silly, dramatic, I don't know what else to call it, but like whimsical metal,
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by how that's like in Primus and these other bands, like the whimsy is paired with like pretty aggressive sounds, like distorted guitar and like heavy drum beats and stuff. Like, what does the metal mean in that context? Is it still supposed to be aggressive and scary, or is it just like fun aggression?
Well, I mean, like Les Claypool's like favorite bands were like Rush and Metallica.
Let me check my list of topics and make sure I'm not forgetting something important, but maybe we should call it pretty soon.
Did we talk about anything?
We talked about a lot.
Okay.
I've always struggled with having like the remnants of photography in my paintings. So yeah. I want to like pick your brain about this really quick. Like, does it ever bother you like knowing the origin of the reference is in that painting like forever? Like you can't get rid of it because it's all that information came from some source, and that like that's kind of the beauty of it. I realize that, but does it like ever like bug you?
The way that I deal with that is like trying to use the most generic images possible. Because if it's like I like will usually like Google a thing and I'll just pick the first one, and that's like, well, I just picked the most normal thing,
Yeah, but then your paintings are like dictated by whatever algorithm Google is using at that. Yeah,
well, I mean, but whatever. It's just like because I want everything to be kind of like pop art general, that's kind of like I want there to be this like open. That's why it's kind of hard to deal with like subjects for me, because what I really want is just like shapes and things, and like to be building a kind of like complex thing that is not anyone or has no personality, or is like its personality is all of the shapes and colors that are on top of it,
But then you're also putting like photos you took of yourself, which are hyper specific and hyper personal,
right? Which I think is interesting to me.
Yeah,
that's
for
like
sure.
That's like if I'm going to generate, like that's why I get into the photography element of it, and I do the makeup, and I like want there to be like specific costumes and stuff, because I'm generating these images, which usually I end up trying to make kind of generic enough so that I can like kind of fit it into the universe of genericism that I kind of try to exist in, which is weird considering how much I like appreciate super hyper specific stuff, but like I don't know. I think it's just this kind of pop art sensibility that I appreciate,
Yeah, and I think everyone does that these days. Like I definitely do it. Like if I need to know how to paint a music stand for some reason, I'll just Google it and I'll look at like the top 3 to 5 search results and kind of do a conglomeration. But yeah, we're all just doing because
they give you like that like stock image quality that is like lit in this way that's really easy to paint. It's like it's got simple gradients in it, and it's like on a flat enough color background that it's like it's all there for painting, and it's easy to kind of like digest and put into paintings.
I kind of want to like roast you about something you told me in undergrad. because you were roasting me. You remember? Do you remember when?
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Do you remember when I was like cutting out photos from National Geographic and like making terrible collages and then like painting them?
Yeah.
You
It's a little full
like
circle
they're
here.
they're bad paintings. Like I wasn't doing good versions of that idea at the time. I will own that. But
Sounds like exactly what I'm doing, huh?
it's different though, because there was an element of just like you're at least like you know what you want to paint, and then you're plugging in the first Google result of what it is. But I was just kind of like letting this random crate dive of old magazines influence what my painting was.
Well, I think it's always been like my like, what's the word, like why I'm confounded by your art or something. I think that's the right word. Like
Maybe
I'm just like why do you choose like the absolute least cool things ever to paint? And it was in college. It was like you're painting like it was so like dusty and old to be like painting National Geographics of like African women and like and the opera singer is like the perfect example to me. It's like,
which was not without that was from imagination. I didn't even have a source.
Sure,
for that.
but like to me it was just like insane to me that was like you being like, yeah, let me think of a good idea for painting. Yeah. It's gonna be an opera singer wearing like a vest, you know? It was just like this crazy kind of classical idea of what it was just like it's still insane to me like what you choose to paint, because it's just like it just seems so like deeply uncool to me in a way that I like a lot and I find very cool. But it's still mind bending to me, you know? Like to me, like I think I've always had this kind of like desperation to kind of like be kind of hip and like with it or whatever, you know? And like you just seem so opposed to that. And I have always liked that a lot about like the things that you choose to paint, you know?
Well, as you can see, it's working out great for my art career. I think maybe your approach is a little more successful.
Well, I mean, also just a lot more like desperate, you know, or like, you know, whatever. I feel desperate in my, because also it's like for me to be like, I'm into like fashion or something. You like look at me and you're like, no, you're not. You look like an idiot. Like you don't dress cool. Like, you have no. So it's just like.
But that's definitely a very like accepted way to be fashionable, is just to wear like the most basic shit, but tastefully curated white t-shirt.
But I don't really like. I'm just not like I'm not a good taste person. I'm an actively bad taste person. I believe in bad taste as being the correct answer, and I think that's why I like your art so much, is because to me it's like the most heinously bad taste, and I don't know if like you and like I think you might be insulted by that, but.
Well, I would be if you weren't in the same breath also saying like I like bad things or like I have bad taste.
Well, but I also think you're like a master draftsman, which is I think is like there's the respect of me thinking that you're just like an amazing painter. Like your handle of the medium has always been chopped out, you know. You're chopsy. You've always been very chopsy. You got less chopsy. I feel like you like got a loose or whatever, you know. But your subject matter.
I started to hate the act of like painting, like with that BFA painting. I was miserable for like the month it took to make that painting, and I've kind of vowed never to do that again. Yeah,
and your paintings got like much looser, and I mean, but also you are so inherently like you're so good at drawing from life and stuff like that that you can put a like anatomical situation together pretty swiftly, you know.
I try to go for speed and efficiency these days,
which is smart, but also you still like never cease to have the most like heinously bad taste kind of things going on, which I think, you know, like doctor baby situation, like it's just to me it's awesome. It's awesome. It's like what's that like the fuck are they called? Like 80s smooth rock band, best band of all time.
Steely Dan.
Steely Dan, like that Steely Dan cover with like the like Geiger-y like babies. Never mind. Irrelevant.
I can't remember which cover that is, but now I need to look that up because that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, I just like believe in bad taste as like the solution to the problem, which is like as I said, got me nowhere in this last recent show where I like tried to ham up bad taste, and then it kind of got me in a world of trouble.
Well, that's perfect because I think that's a great note to end on.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you, Orion, for
You're welcome.
for talking.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Sorry this was really long. I think it's like 3 hours.
4 hours.
But see you next time.
Classic me talking for like a painfully long time.